I just want to say one thing, which is don't forget the next webinar that we're running on the 30th of November in the evening at 7:30. That is going to be a party. It's going to be music and dancing and cookery, all from South Sudan. And it's about having a good time and understanding a bit more about South Sudan, particularly Western Equatoria State, and also doubling our donations through the Big Give in order to support this school. So that's my little advert, and I'll now hand over to Peter for his question or comment.
Well, thank you, Jean. You're a wonderful chairman to have remembered me right from the beginning of this webinar is quite remarkable. I was really only going to ask a casual question, but the discussion has sort of led to further thoughts, really. I just wonder, and I'd like to get some sort of a picture of how influential the school can be in the local community. We were actually talking about vaccinations, and I wondered whether the school can actually influence how many of the girls are able to be vaccinated. If anybody has information on that, I'd be interested. But the links with the immediate local community strike me as being terribly important as well. And it would be interesting to know just how much of the community at large the school becomes, or whether it, I suspect initially, at any rate, it was probably a bit of an isolated group, but hopefully is spreading its influence locally. I'd be interested in any comments.
I'll perhaps just add something, because I've known the school for longer than Dave on this particular one. The school was originally set up with very strong community support. It was the community that wanted the school to be set up. So it wasn't us noticing it, but very much the local community. I think to link back to something Dolway said, I think initially people didn't really understand what education was or what it could do, because many parents and members of the local community had not had much in the way of education themselves. What we've noticed in the last period, obviously I haven't been since COVID has happened, but on my last visit there, which was about, I think, November 2019, parents were starting to really understand what education could achieve, because they were seeing their girls speaking well in English, being very confident, being able to help siblings with their own education, being able to help with medication because they can read labels on medication and so on. And there's starting to be a much stronger sense about what the school can achieve in the local community, it seems to me. I think also we'd also thought right at the beginning that schools are often important hubs for social and economic development. And I think that's starting to happen. Interestingly, when Golda and Jackie and I spoke with Grace Apollo earlier this week, she was talking about now trying to get the government to build better roads between Iba and Yambio and between Iba and Maridi, because there's now this school, quite a lot of employment within the school and so on. And also she's lobbying the government to try and improve the health facilities within Iba community. And these are partly the effects of the school itself. So I think that's quite promising, really. Perhaps a bit of a long reply, but I hope that that answers some of what you're after.
Yes, thank you, Jean, very much. It is interesting and very encouraging, I may say. Thank you.
Is one of the problems, I know that it was said earlier that education wasn't really valued or hasn't been valued for many years.
Hasn't been. Yeah.
And you have just said that, in fact, it's beginning to be valued and that IBA is being appreciated. In a way, the South Sudan is decades behind the Republic of the Sudan and most of the other countries in Africa, because when I was there in Khartoum in the late 60s and early 70s, it was a civil war and the North was in control. And they moved the only 2 boys' secondary schools to Khartoum. And there were no girls' secondary schools. So the only education that was happening in South Sudan was at the primary school level. So people had got used to having no education. No secondary education, it wasn't available. No university education, because in fact Khartoum was the only university in the whole country. And the only Southerners who had the opportunity for university were a handful who had emerged from the secondary schools from Juba and I think Malakal, which had been moved, whether they wanted to or not, they were moved to the Khartoum area by the government of the North. So the South has a lot to catch up on in the way of education. And presumably a lot of people have got used to not having much education. And that is just beginning to change, as Jean was saying, that there is a value now being placed on education. I don't know whether that's any use to you, what I've said, but I mean, there is a background history. And also the teacher training colleges were in the North. And there was only one for intermediate teachers and one for higher education, for secondary school. And that was it.
Yes, thank you very much. That's really...
That's 40, 50 years ago. But I don't know how long it lasted after that. I can't remember when the Civil War ended. And when, secondary schools were allowed to develop or developed in the South. Yeah.
Thank you for that background. And it's a reminder, isn't it, of the importance of understanding the history and the context, not just the immediate situation. And maybe one of our future webinars might look at some of the aspects of history of the South. I think it'd be very interesting. I know I'm learning a great deal from my fellow trustee, Justin, about the history of South Sudan. Would anybody else like to come in?
There were a few questions by Michelle Halings earlier, so about the prospects for continuing professional development. The question was, what prospects are there for continuing professional development within the school itself? Example, how cooperative is lesson planning? Are there inset sessions among staff to explore the nature of good teaching and good learning?
I think that's probably one for Julia as our UK head teacher, who's been spearheading some of the links with IBA Girls School, if she's still there.
Yes, I'm still there. Continuing professional development is a challenge in any situation, particular challenge in South. There is very little history of professional development going on in schools, and there is very little in the way of networks for people to work together in the local area, which is much more a tradition in this country. But one of the things that we support the school in doing is that we had commissioned a person to do some research into the needs of the school, somebody based in South Sudan, who's been working with the school for the last few months to look into the professional development needs as considered by the local community and the school, which we think is extremely difficult. It's very easy for us from a European background to go in and say, oh, we think this needs to be done, that to be done. But it's very important that the school identifies their own needs. And I think the way forward is going to be very much more on accessing to online resources, and for staff to support each other by sharing their own expertise. And this is one of the areas that I know the school is very keen in the new head teacher that they recruit. So there is work going on. Staff do understand the need for good lesson planning. There is a whole new national curriculum, and the school has all the new textbooks for teaching the new curriculum. And one of the things they have identified is the need for professional development for delivering the new curriculum. So there's a lot of work going on. Work has been done in the past to support delivery of teaching and learning, but lots more work is needed, and that's the current situation.
Thank you, Julia. I can see that Kathy Williams has her hand up.
I also can't turn the video on, but just a thought that occurs to me, might there be a role for FIGS to sponsor girls that graduate off the top of the secondary school to go through teacher training? And if they are sponsored, then maybe come back and serve at the school for a year or two?
Great idea. And I think if we can raise enough money, that will be terrific. I think our focus at the moment has to be keeping the school going, but as soon as we are able to expand our funding base, it's a brilliant idea. Anybody? Oh, Richard, good morning. Lovely to see you.
Nice to see you. Good morning, everyone. My question is, we've talked a lot about perhaps university education, but my observation is that opportunities don't seem to exist in tertiary education, like we used to have with technical colleges in this country. You know, you cannot get good technicians for love or money in lots of places. And is there because I tried looking on the university website for the university in Juba, and I couldn't find much about it. What are the opportunities for tertiary education, particularly in things like telecommunications and all sorts of things like that, which, apart from opportunities of work, are great places for girls to work in so you're starting to change an ethos within the country, girls being in work, not just in motherhood and all the rest of it. What are there opportunities for tertiary education, and particularly how close do they come to EBA? That's it.
Thank you. I think I'm going to, I wonder if Irene Fabiano is still on the call, because she's based in Juba and she's an engineer and may have the best information on this. Is she still with us?
No, she's actually left because she's left a question to be asked about science labs. She, being a chemical engineer herself, she's asking about the facilities of the science labs at the school. So she's not here.
Okay. I wonder who might know about tertiary. Perhaps John might be the person who knows best. Although I think we're indicating, Richard, that we don't really know on this particular issue. John, what are your thoughts? Because you and I have quite strong links with the University of Juba, but obviously we're talking about more like further education, technical education.
I think this is very crucial, actually. These have been some excellent suggestions. Teachers being trained to come back from Iba Girls School. I think Richard's comment about developing vocational technical trades and skills, particularly in IT, has been well talked about when Pierre Philip was part of the Ministry of Education. I know that the Yei Teacher Training Institute had alongside it long-term supporters, people who are here actually, Jane Corbett, supporters who lived out there and developed a technical trades institution. I think this is very important indeed, but it does involve a lot of investment for the long term in a situation of great crisis. So it does involve that long-term view of commitment to move steadily through the crisis to the long term. In terms of science equipment and so on, Paul Sanders has given a lot of thought to this, and he may have something to add.
Oh, hi there. Well, there was a plan to set up a science laboratory, or a couple of science laboratories of recent plans. That hasn't happened as yet so far. And without that, there's a limited amount of science equipment that I've taken out there. But there is a willingness of staff to actually use that. It's quite interesting to see when you brought out some kit and show them what it is and what it can be used for, they do then start to introduce it into their lessons. And the national curriculum for the new national curriculum South Sudan for science is quite extensive, actually. It's quite old-fashioned, but quite extensive. And in order to do that properly, it does need laboratory and proper kit. But I think that really needs more development in terms of resources and plant.
Great, thank you very much for that.
Jean, is it worth mentioning that we do have a long-term plan for building works in the school? So we've just in the process, I think, of completing a classroom block, some dormitory accommodation, and some kitchen space, and that is currently in train. The next phases of our plan for the estate is so a STEM building, science technology building, and then also a health clinic, which I think probably we would say was very much needed, and an administrative building too. Those are the sorts of things that are in the plan. But as with everything, it's about A, sequencing the management of that building work, and B, funding it. So that's where we're at with it.
Great, thank you. So I think this is going to be one of the few schools that does have a good science base, if you like, but there's still a long way to go on technical and vocational education, and it's really important that that's raised. I'm just thinking we're at 12:20. I don't want us to outstay our welcome. We'd like you to come back to future webinars rather than feeling that you're stuck online for hours and hours. So although the discussion is intensely interesting, and I'm sure could last, well, we could probably have a whole day conference in a way, I think the best thing now is to close this webinar, but to encourage you to come back to future ones. As I mentioned, our next one is on the 30th of November in the evening, entirely cultural and fun. We're planning a series of webinars for 2022, and so come back for those. But first of all, then, just to finish, to say thank you to everybody. I thought we had really rich experience in the webinar room, and it's certainly turned out to be the case with all the different perspectives and experience and knowledge that people have brought into this discussion. It's been outstanding and really stimulating, and I think has given FIG's trustees things to think about for the future as well. So thank you very much. I'd also like to thank the people behind the scenes, Jackie Gallo and Janet Barker, who've done a huge amount of work in preparing for this seminar and then running it. Golda describes Jackie as having octopus hands and a big brain, and that's what you need to run a webinar like this. I'd also like to thank John, who helped us find some of the videos, and also Golda, who has been a delight to co-host with this morning. So thank you very much, Golda. We hope you'll come again as a FIG's ambassador for our future webinars.
I just wanted to, there's really nothing to add, to say thank you very much for having me here. And as a South Sudanese, I'm immensely proud of Iba's boarding school. I myself came through a a Catholic school, which I learned later was actually kept alive by donations such as we're doing today for IBA. And that has given me a good foundation to continue with the rest of my education and life. And I'm quite impressed by the amount of questions always in the webinars we have, because that shows interest and the commitment that our supporters do have. And honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I'm very moved and very thankful and grateful.
Dave, as our chair, is there anything you'd like to say to finish off?
So I want to echo your thanks, Jean. Thank you to you for guiding us through so professionally, and thank you to Golda for her leadership and insight during the course of the seminar, to Jackie, Janet and John for all the hard work behind the scenes. It's hugely appreciated, and it's just a reminder of A, how important the work that FIGS and IGBS is doing, and B, how exciting it is and how exciting the future is, and that we're part of a future which is about optimism, about hope in a country that needs optimism and hope and needs what IGBS will be producing, which is leaders for the future. So can I thank everyone online for being part of that and for being involved and for taking such an interest today. I really appreciate it, and look forward to continuing to work alongside you and seeing you at the next one of these brilliant seminars and webinars. So thank you all very much.